Warning, prepare for swear. Caution is advised. Hello and welcome to this review of the ZX Spectrum. Specifically, we're mainly going to be looking at its keyboard, but I'll talk about the machine itself as well, as it's a pretty interesting and cool piece of computing history. The ZX Spectrum was released in 1982 by Sinclair Research, a British company whose founder, Clive Sinclair, actually got a knighthood for contributions to the PC industry, and the ZX Spectrum is perhaps the most well-known product. It is a microcomputer, as it was called, intended for the home computer market. There were a lot of major contenders in this segment at the time, including its big North American rival, the Commodore 64, and worse, the all-devouring IBM PC and its compatibles. But the Specky, as it was often known, was still quite popular in Europe, and of course especially in the UK, where it was a bestseller. All in all, it sold about 5 million units over an 11-year production span, which is really not bad. There were two main reasons why the ZX Spectrum was still able to hold its own against the onslaught of the IBM PC. First of all, it was dirt cheap in comparison. Corrected for inflation, it was less than a seventh the cost of an IBM 5150, although admittedly that doesn't include the cost of a monitor. Second, it had a pretty well-developed gaming scene, which is something that took much longer to develop on the PC. After all, that was primarily used for spreadsheets, word processing, and database management, that sort of stuff. But the Specky had a very large games library, including well-loved titles such as Death Chase, Rebel Star, Head Over Heels, and the classic Dizzy series, as well as ports of popular games like Boulder Dash, R-Type, SimCity, Lode Runner, Gauntlet, and Elite. You know, the one that spawned Elite Dangerous. There were a whole slew of clones of the ZX Spectrum as well, most of them released in South America, or especially the Eastern Bloc, as well as a whole bunch of third-party add-ons, including joysticks, which were quite popular. It looked pretty good too, although it reportedly took some programming finesse to get the most out of its graphics capabilities. It had good color and resolution, compared to the sad look of IBM's CGA color modes, and I think you'll agree that it looks pretty nice actually. Although gaming on the PC wasn't exactly unheard of, I grew up with it myself after all, it was more of a gimmick, in the same way that playing games on your graphing calculator is nowadays. The Specky was a fairly well-respected gaming platform at the time though. It ran BASIC and it was connected to a composite monitor like this. I don't have one here right now, but I don't have any first-hand experience with one of these anyway, so I wouldn't be able to do it justice. In any case, the thing I wanted to focus on is the keyboard, which, after all, is more my area of expertise. Note that this keyboard module includes the actual computer in it as well. This really wasn't uncommon at the time at all, but especially as it's so small, some of you may not have anticipated that. In fact, it's only 23.5 by 14.5 centimeters. Or in imperial units.
4 now half and a 4 now quarter, half and a 4 5, 4 now 5, 5 and a 5 and a 5 now quarter, 5 and a quarter, 5 and a half and a 5 and a.
Now, this is pretty tiny compared to its North American rival, the Commodore 64, which is also a lot fatter by the way. The Specky is remarkably low profile, but not just that, it's actually quite small even compared to a modern 60% keyboard. And I mean, those don't even have a whole computer in them. Although British manufacturers, let's be kind, not generally known for its quality, it's not as bad as it might look. It comes with a metal top plate, I think it's aluminium, and it's dented on this one as it's rather thin, and although it creaks a bit, it's not as loose as you might expect. It's not exactly a prize winner, don't get me wrong, but considering it looks like it's got the solidity of a fruitcake, it's okay, I guess. For reference, it weighs 562 grams. Or in dick nugget numbers.
5 at a number, 30, 5 at a number, 40, 45 at a number, 50, sold $40.
What isn't okay though is the key feel, famously so even. I mean, Jesus Christ's pre-medieval balls, it's absolutely horrifying. I don't know what arse-intruding dildo came up with this shit, but they clearly didn't have all their gears running smoothly, because this is just ridiculous. What it is essentially a chiclet keyboard, except the chiclets are made out of rubber instead of hard plastic. So you're typing on sponges basically. I have no words. It's kind of like typing on Haribo sweets, and I've been told that it's really finicky with when it registers a key press too. It'll not do anything most of the time, and then if you press it slightly too hard, the cursor just zips off like a cat you've set fire to. In fact, I've heard that these keys, and I really use that term in the broadest possible sense here, were more suited as erasers than as actual keys. They feel horribly mushy and even slightly sticky. It makes me feel dirty just typing on it. It's like typing on decomposing dead bodies. Now, it does actually have some tactility, kinda, but the feel is really not great because it's basically a rubber dome over membrane keyboard, except the keys are the rubber domes themselves. And that's about as nice as it sounds. It's just shit for the birds, man. Its predecessor, the ZX81, which I also happen to have on loan here, is, believe it or not, worse. A lot worse. It uses blister keys instead, pretty much exactly like what you would find on a microwave oven. So if you like typing on your microwave, this is the keyboard for you. For anyone with actual fingers, I advise you to steer well clear. Jesus, Mary and Joseph in a threesome. What an abominable, shit-flavored poop cake this thing is. Holy fuckballs. This thing is lucky it's not getting its own video, because mightiest of shits, I'd have thrown half the dictionary at it. My god, I can honestly barely describe how bad it is. Both of them are a really far cry from the IBM PC's keyboard, which was engineered to almost crystalline perfection. It's built like a tank and it types like a dream, giving perfect, crisp tactile feedback and a clear sing-songy audible click, with die-sub PBT keycaps, a steel chassis, etc, etc. Although admittedly it's about 2.6 times as big, 4.5 times as heavy, and I wouldn't be surprised if it actually costs slightly more as well, but I'm not sure about that. And this isn't even a computer, this is just a keyboard, nothing more. But man, what a difference in quality. Compared to the IBM PC Junior, which came out 2 years later, and which was also a chiclet keyboard reviled for its terrible quality, it's, if you can believe it, worse. Much worse. The PC Junior is a horrible piece of shit, but the keys feel much more positive on your fingers, more tactile, it doesn't feel as dirty, it's just better in every way. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever be saying that about the PC Junior. Now, to get the most out of the keyboard's relatively low key count, only 40, less than most 40% keyboards, they had to assign multiple functions to each key, up to 6. Now, as I said, it runs on BASIC, which was a pretty common system at the time and relatively easy to use. And like I said before, this sort of thing is really not my forte, but it's not entirely clear to me why you would need so many functions for such a simple programming language. So, for example, you've got sine, cosine, and tangent keys on here, like on a calculator for some reason. Code, peek, poke, beep, ink, paper, flash, even a go sub button, as well as a whole slew of abbreviations I really don't know about. It's especially puzzling to me how you'd access all these different functions on each key. I'm guessing they must have been context sensitive, because it's got only 2 shift buttons. The layout is also rather weird, and has got a lot of criticism for it at the time. Weirdnesses include a line nav at the top here, tab on the right, space in the bottom right, and a general lack of buttons to begin with, it seems to me. Both the abysmal key feel and the weird layout were reasons for people to shun the keyboard, to such a degree that third-party developers actually created replacement keyboard modules that you could use so you wouldn't have to use the Spectrum's actual keyboard. Generally speaking, the idea behind these was that you would put the whole Spectrum inside the keyboard and then connected the keyboard to the Spectrum via a cable. Examples include the AMS Low Profile, the Saga 1 Emperor, the Stone Chip, and even Sinclair themselves made a replacement for it at some point, which ultimately became the basis for the updated Spectrum Plus model. I actually have a replacement keyboard from DK-Tronics here, which I've had for a while. This one features massive double-shot keycaps, and it's a rare example of a keyboard with first-generation Fujitsu leaf spring switches, although personally I think these aren't as good as the later third-gen ones. Regardless, they are much better than the original ZX Spectrum keyboard, and the fact that there was a whole market for replacing the awful standard keyboard of the Spectrum is really saying something. Nevertheless, despite all this, the ZX Spectrum remained a beloved console, and several recreations such as the ZX Uno, ZX Spectrum Vega, and ZX Spectrum Next were released in the 2010s. The Vega even recreates a few of the crappy buttons on it. Overall, the ZX Spectrum is a very cool look into the primitive antediluvian past of the early 1980s, but typing on it is about as much fun as sticking your dick in a mousetrap and lighting it on fire. It really reminds me of that Fold 2000 piece of foldable arse caramel, actually. Fuck me. If you want to see a lot of swearing, go watch that video. Anyway, that's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following as a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.